Good morning, everyone. I have an exciting day today. I get to be on a garden panel at Gethsemane Garden Center, which is extra special because Gethsemane Garden Center is what started my whole plant addiction. I went in there maybe 2017 and said, I have a north-facing room and I need some houseplants that don't need a lot of light. And they gave me an aglaonema and a snake plant, which I still have, both of those, and have divided them many times. So now it just feels really cool to be back there speaking on a garden panel. So it's gonna be me. It's gonna be Duranis, who, if you have not seen his garden tour that I posted on my channel, I will link that down below. Please go watch. His garden is incredible. And then also, if you're in the Chicago area, there's a restaurant called Uncommon Ground, and they have their own garden on the roof of one of their locations. So that's the third speaker. And I think people have already submitted questions, and then we're just going to answer the ones they've submitted. So I'm really excited. Also excited because I will very likely come home with some plant purchases. So let's go head out now. The garden center is located in the Andersonville neighborhood of Chicago. If you haven't been, highly recommend going. And let's do some plant shopping and some panel speaking. This is the Gethsemane greenhouse where it all started with those two houseplants. So all the houseplants are in here, most of them I think. And also I like to come here in the winter to remember what it feels like to be warm and see the color green. To grow more vegetables, and then I discovered the world of cut flowers, and that kind of took over my garden. But something I've noticed, because I've been just container gardening for 6-ish years now, that there are more compact crops available every year. So I'm growing tomatoes that I think are going to get 12 inches tall. I do grow some that get 3 feet tall with a cage, but I can find cucumbers that are small, zucchinis that are small. There are so many compact seeds available. Just go online. I feel like that's becoming more and more popular. Same thing with just all plants in general. And then I have an app I really like called From Seed to Spoon, that when I started, it takes your location from your phone and it tells you, here's what you can start this month, here's what you can start this month. So that's how I learned, and I still do look at it sometimes, but eventually you'll just get it down. But I highly recommend that too if you're just starting.
I have this rule of thumb: if you see dirt, add another plant. I don't follow any common rules of gardening because Chicago has such a short season. As we all know, a lot of people ask, do I start anything from seed? I don't. I try to buy my plants as lush and as full as possible. Obviously, some are small, but by the time October rolls around, I have 2-foot banana trees that sometimes have gotten up to 13 feet tall in just that short amount of time. So I don't follow any particular rule. I try to fill up as much space as I can, and I let the plants do what they choose. Only the strong survive.
And then go to the other plant and just went back and forth, and that did work. I got 3 apples on a 2-foot tall tree. Other than that though, the more diversity I add to my garden, the more pollinators. And because my space is small, I mean the flowers are basically right next to the vegetables, so everything's mixed together. And also, I know not quite related, but the more diversity I've planted, I feel like I've had to do less pest management too. So like you said, it's getting more of the beneficials, which are pollinating and also taking care of the pests. Trying to get more natives into the garden. The main thing again has been what will survive over winter in my raised beds. So I do have one raised bed that's all dedicated to natives, and what has survived so far are black-eyed Susans, milkweed, and echinacea. Some varieties do come back, some haven't, but those have been the ones that I don't do anything. I leave my raised beds, they're outside, uncovered all winter. And then this year I'm adding some more. So it's all just, again, like I said, a science experiment of what natives can I bring to my garden that will actually survive the winter, because I don't want to make it more complicated. And like, yes, I could have this native, but then I'd have to bring it in, and and then I have to store it, and then I have to bring it out. I want my garden to be as natural as possible, but yes, I do have some natives. I want to leave it outside. That's my goal, is to not, again, have to store things anywhere else over winter. So I'm gonna use a larger pot, and then for most of the things that I leave outside that I want to add some protection to, I push them up into the corner, so like the wall of the house or wherever, and I'll just throw a tarp over it, and that works for the most part. But again, I haven't tried it with the fig yet because it's currently in the garage. But that is going to be my plan. As it gets taller, I mean, I'm growing it in a container, so it probably won't reach, I don't know how many feet it's supposed to get, over 10 feet. I don't think we'll get there, but at least being in the container will keep it smaller. And again, just a larger and larger tarp is my plan. Everything I grow is in a potting mix, so it's not technically soil, and most potting mixes do come with nutrients, but your plants will go through those very quickly. I have everything on my rooftop, and a question I get asked a lot is if I change out the soil, and I absolutely do not, because I don't even want to think about how I would be able to do that. I just refresh, that's what I call it, every year. I add compost, and then I add perlite, because with the potting soil, the pieces get smaller and smaller, and then there's not as great drainage, so I do have to add perlite every year. So I do that in the spring. And then I also add a granular fertilizer at planting time, which is great. It cannot make as much compost as I would need, but at the same time, I also don't need, I just go to a garden center and I pick probably what's the cheapest compost, and I see if my garden likes it. Strategy, but tumbler composting has been super easy. So if you do have space for one, it can be pretty small. I highly recommend it. So I grew up gardening. When I was little, we lived in Northwest Indiana, and my mom had a small flower garden. We had fruit trees. My grandpa had a bigger garden. So I always knew I wanted a garden someday. And then we moved to Chicago, and I'd only ever experienced gardens growing in the ground. So I thought I would need to wait until I had ground in order to garden. And then I think it was 2018 or 2019, I got tired of waiting and I liked living in the city. So I just got my first grow bag and planted a tomato and started from there. So it's been, since 2019 now that I've been just container gardening, and I think my goal is just to keep pushing the limits of what I can grow, because I want to show everyone that you can grow almost anything you want, even if you don't have a yard. So pushing my garden limits. 3 years ago, maybe now, there's an organization, nonprofit called With Love Chicago, that leaves bouquets around the city for people to find. And I thought, well, I have an abundance of cut flowers, so I started leaving out bouquets on the sidewalk. They go so quickly, which is great, but also I never expected to get anything in return, but I've gotten letters. For example, one of my favorite ones was someone's grandma had just passed away, and I left out a bouquet that was all pink flowers, and that was this person's grandma's favorite color. And so they left me a thank you note, and I just never thought that leaving extra flowers. I mean, people say, oh, it's such a nice thing, but honestly, I have too many flowers, I need to give them away. So just something of like giving away the extra stuff that I had could have such an impact on people. It's been really nice, so I just keep doing that. Yes, I do think veggies are a good option for that setup. I'm actually thinking about growing cucumbers up in arch along with flowers this year. We'll see if that happens. But I don't do a lot of maintenance. Like, I kind of just let what happens happens, but I do have plants that are like stacked up on each other. I have an irrigation system set up. And not everything is set up on the irrigation. I'm hoping eventually I will have fewer pots so that they all can be. But I don't have a problem usually during the season with too much water because my pots dry out very quickly. So that hasn't typically been an issue for me. But I would say if you do have a smaller space and you can get an irrigation system set up, it'll seem more complicated than it actually is. And that just helps keep everything watered. But I mean, vertical gardening has been super easy. And again, kind of thinking out of the box. So I use my flower cart to grow plants up. I also got, I think it's supposed to be like to sell bouquets of flowers, but it's a stand that has 3 rows of buckets, so I just drilled holes into them and put flowers in them. So if you think there's something pretty that is vertical and you want to put something in it, just make sure there's drainage. Was there another part of that question that I'm forgetting?
Just if veggies were put.
Oh yeah, oh definitely, yes. Oh, I also want to try it with cantaloupes too, but you do have to make sure you're keeping the weight up when you are growing something that has larger fruit on it.
Once edible, however, I do a lot of vertical gardening. And the one thing that people have to remember, you can grow plants into anything. I've used milk crates.
And I put a hole in the bottom of it, and I planted bamboo in it. And everybody that came over to my house was like, "That's such a cool container." And I'm like, "It's supposed to be a watering. It's supposed to be doing the watering, not being watered." But just be resourceful. And I think the common theme here would be drill drainage holes. Don't be afraid. Roots are constantly wet, and that's great. Roots need water, but they also need oxygen. So if they can't
Clogged up if you have very few, or sometimes you'll see people with that one center hole. I had a huge planter in front of my house. I noticed that it was just seeping out water when it should have been really draining. It was very heavy for my friend and I to like literally tilt it over. But once the drainage hole that came back up, once I drilled extra holes into it, you would have been amazed at how much water came out. So just my daily watering filled up a planter that was up to 4 feet tall. But I noticed it because you said my plants started to get wilted and everything, and it did make sense. So drill a lot of holes.
Yeah.
I'll say, I do have a lot of zinnias. That's mostly my main focus. The butterflies love the zinnias, and then I also will plant dill or parsley in my flower beds to attract the caterpillars. Sometimes they get too attached, and a wasp will eat them or something. But if I plant what I know they love, I mean, they're going to find it. I've never had an issue of planting something and then the pollinator that I wanted to attract not finding it. So yeah, zinnias are probably my favorite annual that attracts most of the pollinators in my garden.
I was going to say zinnias.
We all say zinnias.
Cut them all back. That's really super low maintenance. Anything else, because again, I think the largest plant I have is maybe like 2 feet by 2 feet. I'll cut off dead branches, but that's about it. I don't really have anything that's growing crazy in my garden, so I actually don't have to do a lot of pruning.
I don't do any pruning with any of my vines, but I do cut a lot of my elephant ears.
Problem. You might want to look up if what you're specifically growing. Some things will only like fruit on like the 3rd year growth or the 2nd or on any new growth. So you need to leave some of the old growth there too.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of starting the season off strong, and by the middle of summer, I'm like, look, whatever happens, happens. And I'm gonna get fruit of some kind.
I would say, again, because I'm just using potting mix, one of my goals for the garden is I'd love someone else to study the potting mix and how it changes and then report it back to me, but I haven't been able to find that information, so I might have to try that myself one day. But I've never added insects. I've found worms, probably that came in with a plant that I purchased, and I found out myself that if I leave them in the small pot, they will eventually start to eat the roots of my plant, so I just take them and put them in my larger raised beds. So I would say if you find worms, put them in a larger container so they don't eat the roots of your plant. But I don't add anything on my own.
I don't add anything, but my garden bed on the side of my house, I have a ton of insects, I have a lot of worms.
I think that is going to wrap us up. So to each of the 3 of you, thank you very much. Thank you all for sticking around. I know it isn't the best spring weather today, but it's 5 degrees warmer than it was supposed to be. I haven't felt a lot of wind, and there's no rain yet, so I will take it. So thank you all very much, and just come find us if you have any questions.
Thank you.
So I have to throw that up on.